yesterday. Adam Schefter basically put out a tweet saying NFL teams are going to be looking at Steve Sarkisian. I expected this eventually for Steve Sarkisian. I didn't know it would happen this offseason. What came to mind when you heard about this, Gerald?
I mean, the first thing that came to my mind is, like, you have to remember who Schefter's sources are. You have to, like, generally it's going to be an agent trying to get their client's name out there, or, a GM trying to, like, stir the pot and see what interest is there. So, like, part of me doesn't necessarily take it super seriously. Now, again, I'm with you. I think Sark would entertain conversations, entertain calls. It makes sense, right? He's a competitive guy. It's what coaching football is part of it is about, is like building your resume. So, like, it's not necessarily something I'm worried about at this point. Like, I think Texas needs to focus on winning this Saturday, and I think that is Chris Del Conte said something today, actually Monday, as we're talking, that, like, it almost feels like somebody just kind of throwing a wrench in a game week preparation. So they're not going to comment on it, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too. I don't know how close Chris Del Conte and Steve Sarkisian are. Like, let's be honest here. When most coaches do leave, they're not going to be like, hey, I'm getting NFL calls. I'm probably going to take it. They're just not going to do that most of the time. Now, Sark could be different. There are some guys that will do that have the courtesy to do that. I don't know if Sark is one of those guys, and if he has a close connection again with Chris Del Conte. When I heard it, I wasn't surprised because, I mean, he's been at the NFL level. He was a decent offensive coordinator. He has an NFL scheme. It would not shock me at all if eventually he does leave Texas for the NFL. The thing is, guys, the backup quarterback is Arch Manning. I don't think he's going to recruit Arch Manning and then be like, you know what? I recruited one of the most talented guys in the history of high school recruiting, and I'm just going to hand him off to the next guy and not give it a shot. So that it would really, really shock me if he left this offseason. Like, I would be completely blindsided, honestly. Also, the money. He's getting paid anywhere from, with incentives, base of $10 million upwards to $12 million if he wins the national championship. I don't know if he has the type of cachet yet to where he can get that in the NFL. There's not many NFL coaches that make that type of money right now. The average is like $7.5 million, so he's over the average. There's only a couple guys that I think of: Jim Harbaugh, John Harbaugh. I think Sean McVay's over that. Kyle Shanahan's probably hovering around that. He doesn't have that cachet yet. So if he went into the NFL, he's probably getting a pay cut, honestly. And now he would be working less. I will say that. You don't have to work as hard in the NFL with all the transfer portal nonsense that goes on. So you got to be on the clock 365 in college. You don't have to do that in the NFL. But with the jobs open right now, too, does he want to go to New England? I wouldn't want to go to New England. Does he want to go to – yeah.
That's Mike Vrabel. They're going to hire Vrabel for that. I'd be shocked if it was anybody else.
And then the Jaguars, I think, are those are the two openings right now. I don't think there's any other openings. So I don't see him as a fit for any of those at all. I will say this, hypothetically, let's say Antonio Pierce coaches another year next year for the Raiders, and then he gets fired next year. That's a job I could see Steve Sarkisian being interested in. At that point, you could have a quarterback, and whether that's Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, it's the Las Vegas Raiders, for God's sakes. It's an iconic franchise in NFL history. I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, and again, the availability this offseason is a little weird. And again, Sark has wanted to coach Arch Manning since he got to Texas. So, like, there's something to be said about that. And, whatever happens is going to happen. Del Conte's the kind of guy that always has a name or two in his back pocket. So there, I have trusted his coaching hires thus far, and I'll continue to do so. Like, when the inevitable happens, I'm not worried about it.
No, I'm not super worried about it either. Let's get to that. So I have 3 names down, but I'm going to let you hit first. Hit on your first name and let me know who that is for Texas if Steve Sarkisian were to leave.
So this one's probably one that's a little off the beaten path, but it's one that I think slots into a similar role. It's Will Stein at Oregon right now. He is the offensive coordinator there. He's got connections in Texas. He coached at Lake Travis for a while, and then he moved on to Oregon to be Dan Lanning's offensive coordinator. Again, learning under a guy like Lanning, who seemingly has this SEC mindset in the Midwest, on the West Coast, very familiar with the NIL dealings. Let's just put it like that, right? Very familiar with that through his time. And he's an offensive-minded guy. I think players will want to come and stay and play for him. He's a quarterback-minded guy, much like Sark. And so, that would be somebody that if, again, Sark decides to take his talents to the NFL, somebody I'd love to see Texas kick the tires on.
Yeah, that wouldn't be bad. I stayed realistic. Obviously, I'm not going to be like, you know what? I want Urban Meyer. I want Dan Lanning. I want Bill Belichick. Like maybe we could give Bill Belichick. I don't think I'd want him at Texas, but I mean, I don't know how he's going to do in college. But number one is the guy we just played, Kenny Dillingham. I would love to freaking hire Kenny Dillingham. He's a young offensive guy. I think he would do great at recruiting at the University of Texas. I think he would absolutely kill it with the money he would have. And then he's already a really good coach. Like, he got the absolute most out of that roster.
Every
There's
drop.
nothing. Yeah, there's literally no. I don't think there's very few There's very few coaches in the country that could do what he did with that roster. There is. I just don't see many that could do what he did. So I'd love to have him here at Texas. And again, he's a young guy. He's a guy that can grow with the program. He's not a 60-year-old guy that's going to be gone in 5 to 10 years. Like he could literally be at Texas if he does come to Texas for 15, 20, 25 years and build a really strong legacy. And he would get off to a really hot start. He would have a really good roster to play with. I would love to see Arch Manning to play in his system. I think it would be phenomenal to watch. Imagine you saw what Sam Levitt could do in that system. Imagine Arch Manning in that system. So I would love to have Kenny Dillingham if Steve Sarkisian were to leave.
And he's a dude that guys like to play for. He is a guy that like players will line up for. You saw him after the game take the blame for the 4th and 13 touchdown, right? Like that's the kind of dude that guys are going to line up and run through a brick wall for.
100%. Now let's go with your next one. Who's your second guy?
Man, I waffled over this one quite a bit, and I like. This is a terrible decision, but like I wonder what GJ Kinney's talking about down in San Marcos. Like he probably needs a job between Texas State and Austin, but he's a guy who knows the recruiting area. He's been in Austin. He played, he air quotes played, right? Was a backup at Texas. Knows the recruiting area. Has a really good in with a lot of high school football coaches in there. Really well respected offensive mind, a fast riser, young guy that dudes want to play for. Again, he's the kind of in that Dillingham mold, but like a step down from there, where it's like players coach. People seem to like him. Has already a lot of the relationships that you need in the Central Texas area, and in just Texas in general recruiting. So he's another one that, like, I think he probably needs a job between Texas State and landing in Austin. I honestly am terrified for when Dave Aranda gets fired because I think Baylor's going to hire him and he's going to turn Baylor into something. I hate when Baylor's good, but like I definitely think GJ Kinney is a guy who has that kind of 5-ish years down the line mindset for Texas.
No, I don't think that'd be a bad one. I do agree. I think he'd probably need like a middle tier job before he jumped up to Texas. Number 2, I'm going to Glenn Schumann from Georgia. Okay. I think that would be a good hire. I've seen what disciples of Kirby Smart and Nick Saban have done as head coaches. They've done a pretty damn good job. I don't know how – I'd have to listen to him talk a little bit more, see if he's more of a Dan Lanning guy, which I'd love to get Dan Lanning, but he wouldn't go from Oregon to Texas at this point. They're spending like crazy money. But I do think Glenn Schumann would definitely leave Georgia's defense coordinator to be Texas head coach. And I think with the defensive talent that we have on staff, defensive talent that we have on the team, I think he would elevate that. And it'd be interesting if he retained PK or he decided, you know what, I'm going to be my own defensive coordinator or however that worked out. But I would be excited to get him. I think it'd be a pretty good hire. I think there is, like I said, a fall off for me after Kenny Dillingham. I think that's a home run hire for me personally. And the next two guys or the next guy named after Glenn Schumann won't be as good, but still, I think a solid option if Steve Sarkisian were to leave.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Schumann is a heck of a defensive coach. It'd be a very big philosophy switch, and I think it'd be interesting to see that happen. My last guy is a guy who's coaching in the other semifinal game. I think Andy Kotelnicki is another name that I think Texas could and kick the tires on if Sark decides to take his talents to the next level. He's been a fast riser in the coaching circles. He's part of the reason why Kansas was good last year, and him leaving is part of the reason why Kansas was not good this year. Penn State has seemingly figured it out on offense. And what was the big change? They got rid of the offensive coordinator that I've said has been stealing money for the past decade and hired Andy Kotelnicki. So I think that's another one to keep an eye. Like I'd be one that I'd be great if Texas decided to make a call.
Yeah, that would be interesting because I was the biggest fan of this guy. When he left Kansas, I said,
huge.
Yeah, it will be big for Kansas and it'll be big for Penn State. I said Penn State would win the Big Ten because they got him. And then I watched his play calling in the second half of Ohio State versus Boise State, and I just scratched my head because he abandoned things that worked consistently in both those games. And I'm just wondering, are you watching the same game I am? Because if you just ran Katron Allen and Nick Singleton versus Boise State every freaking play, you would have won that game easily. And he decided to get way too damn cute in that game.
There's some spots that definitely happens, and I wonder if it's, again, I've had long conversations. One of my best friends is a Penn State fan about James Franklin's game management and decision making. So I wonder how much of that is head coach meddling versus Kotelnicki's decision making.
No, 100%. That's true. I don't know. The next one, a guy that's been a fast riser. He's a good offensive coach. He's put up 2 good seasons at USF back to back. I like Alec Golich. I think he'd be a good hire. I don't know if he's quite prepared for the Texas job yet, but I think, again, he fits in that mold of a younger guy, good offensive mind. And you've seen what he's done with USF with lesser talent. That was kind of a dead program before he got there. They had a couple bad hires in a row, including an ex-Texas coach in Charlie Strong. And he's done a really good job with them. They've been bowl eligible the last 2 years. They almost beat Alabama at USF, and they almost beat him this year. Before that, before Alabama switched out their tackle and had to put in an injured tackle in the game because the other guy couldn't block, they could have beat Alabama. So I think he'd be a pretty good hire.
And we'd all love him because he doesn't like Tom Herman. So Texas fans would absolutely love to have him because we could all hate on Tom Herman openly.
That would be the funniest thing if someone asked him that during his first press. Like if he's a Texas head coach, you ask him in the first press conference, "What are you feeling so Tom Herman?"
I mean, it was a note. Like they had a midfield altercation. That's all I'm saying. Many people have wanted to say things to Tom Herman. That's all I'm saying.